What
happened
in
qualifying
for
the
Miami
Grand
Prix?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the P1 podcast with Matt and Tommy. And we're back for another competitive session. This time, the main full cojones qualifying. And God, it was pretty rubbish, wasn't it, actually? Probably one of the worst qualifying sessions we've had in a while. Mainly because, well, Q3 was an anticlimax, but we'll get on to that. But yeah, it just wasn't as good as the sprint. And I'm hoping it's not going to be that we look back at the sprint race and say that's better than the main race we're going to have tomorrow as well.
I hope not. Yeah, because the sprint was really good. It is weird that they've kind of flipped it round because qualifying was always a banger, right? And the problem with this like sprint mini day, everyone was like, oh, why is qualifying on a Friday? Qualifying is the really good thing. And then just the way it's fallen today, it's kind of made me feel a bit flat after feeling really excited for the sprint. And it was a really good race. And then we've gone into a qualifying, which is a bit of an anticlimax. Now I'm like, it's a bit annoying. But at least
hey ho, we've got a race tomorrow. The grid is quite beautifully lined up for some battling for P2, so we'll look into that one. At Dullpit27 comes in with the first question, which is opinions on the sprint format. We had an exciting race earlier, but a bit of a boring quali as the main event today. Feels like they're still missing a trick somewhere. I don't know whether we can have a go at the sprint format for this particular occasion because it was the main qualifying which we are slightly moaning about, and we're not going to change main qualifying because usually that's really good. I think it was mainly down to the track characteristics and the ways in which it was, well, usually ramping up, but then fell away at the end of Q3 and nobody was really improving. And that is the worst thing to end a qualifying session like that. I was saying on the Twitch watch-alongs that we're doing as well that the only worse thing to end qualifying on is when you have a dry sort of 2-3 minutes at the start of Q3 and then it just pours down with rain and you don't get any more action. That's the only worse scenario than the one we probably had today. But I'm not going to slander the sprint format. Formula One has taken a step forward, I think, with the way in which they have changed the way we go around and the format. Of course, we have discussed in other podcasts around different tyre compounds and making it a bit more of an unknown. But we're going to save that for another day, or at least I am, because I don't feel like the sprint deserves any slander after the amazingness that we had yesterday. But I will say, if you haven't seen it, we've done a podcast, we've done a video all about the sprint. So if you want to go and find that, there is a dedicated episode.
Yeah, the Kevin Magnussen Grand Prix has its own episode. But For quali, yeah, I think that's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to say, like, oh, we need to change it again because this is kind of the problem. You can twist. I am still of the opinion, I haven't changed my opinion, that I think that I personally don't like it. It's a rare disagreement that we have where I don't like having a qualifying session after a race in the same day. It doesn't compute in my brain. I still don't really like it. But what I will say is that it's very easy to jump on what happens and then say, oh, we should change the whole thing. Because if you go back to the original format of the sprint where it was qualifying, then it decided the grid for the sprint, then they did a sprint which decided a grid for the race. The big criticism for that was, oh, it resets the order. But if we'd done it today like that, you'd have had Ricciardo qualifying fourth, you'd have had Norris at the back, Alonso at the back, Stroll at the back, Hamilton at the back, and it would have been amazing. But next week, or next sprint, it might not be like that. So you can't really judge a whole format based on just how it goes. Sometimes qualifying, rarely, is rubbish, but today, sadly, it was a bit rubbish.
Right, let's get into Q1 first and foremost with Bottas, Sargent, Ricciardo, Magnussen and Zhou, the five that got knocked out. Of course, we had, K-Mag, obviously disappointing that we won't see any antics down in 19th position from him tomorrow. I feel like he'll, unless he goes on hard tyres and stays out forever, in which case we might see some antics. But not a good qualifying performance at all from K-Mag, considering his teammate made it into Q3, but that is just a running trend, I think. And you have Kevin, I don't like playing these tactics, but I have to for the team. Well, it's because Hulkenberg's beating you, unfortunately. Otherwise, Hulk would have to play these tactics if he was the one behind K-Mag. So, yeah, disappointing for him. But the big one, Daniel Ricciardo. He was on the wrong end of a very close Q1, and we were talking about this on Twitch as well during our watch-along, Matt P1 Tommy, if you haven't followed us or joined us for our watch-along, where it was so close, and I just don't get it. I don't understand how Q1 is so close all the time, because the field is not separated, or the top 15 is not separated by 6/10. It doesn't feel like that anyway. And yet Q1 is always so close, especially around some tracks that you maybe don't expect it. And this was one of them. And Ricciardo, it's not like he was miles off, but he just marginally missed out. And he starts 18th after qualifying 4th and finishing in 4th in the sprint earlier today.
Yeah, I apologise, because if you go watch the sprint and go back our podcast and say what we mentioned, we had this whole debate over... oh, you're only as good as your last moment in Formula One, and something Charles Leclerc said. And I made the joke that if Danny Rick ends up making a mistake and getting knocked out in Q1, everyone kind of washed again. And here we are.
That's exactly what happened. Other things to mention from Q1. Zhou just very quietly qualifying in last place.
Again. How many times has that happened this year, it seems?
It's not good enough, really, from him, especially if he wants to stay on the grid for next year, but it's not looking very likely. And then, of course, Logan Sargent, the king of the final sector, but still getting knocked out in Q1, had a purple in the last sector, I think, in this session as well. And bless him, he did have the team radio, and it's like, oh, please tell me I'm through. And they said, oh no, you're 16th. Obviously, he dropped to 17th in the end. He did miss out by a marginal amount, but once again was out-qualified by Alex Albon.
Yeah, Logan needed a strong result, because I think his sprint was very, very good, and it wasn't bad. He's not far behind his teammate. Actually, is directly behind Fernando Alonso on the grid, which should have taken all day long normally, but it's not a great qualifying performance. But it is, and it sounds really bad, but it's not last, which is obviously what he has done on quite a few occasions. So he's not a million miles off his teammate, so it's not like it's an absolute woeful performance. I don't think the Williams is there. We're not seeing Albon getting into Q3 like we did last year in some crazy situations, or qualifying 11th or 12th. Williams just don't seem to have that car now.
It does make you wonder. And finally, there's a question which is about Daniel Ricciardo from Cornish Leads 1. Danny Rick, was the sprint a flash in the pan? What happened? The mistakes lost him a couple of tenths. I still think he could score points tomorrow. I genuinely don't want to write that off. Yuki Tsunoda showed that there is genuine pace in that RB. I'm not going to criticise him too much, and I genuinely believe, even if he didn't turn up for the race tomorrow, his performance and contribution in this Miami Grand Prix weekend is worth him not being called washed. Even if he finishes 20th tomorrow, he scored a handful of points for RB in a miraculous sprint race. But that being said, I think that he still could produce something tomorrow, but it's going to be difficult. It's hard to overtake. He's going to have to do a different strategy, I think, to really get himself in the mix. But yeah, it's I wouldn't like to say the sprint is a flash in the pan, because China, he was showing some promise as well. So yeah, I'm hopeful for Danny Rick that it's not just a one-off.
What I would say is, why does it feel like VCarb, or and even before this when they were AlphaTauri, that when one driver does well, the other has to be awful? It seems to it does seem like it happens on quite more occasion than any other team, where one of them is getting absolutely slandered for being washed, and the other one's being really good, and then it can flip around, and they never both seem to be able to do like a really good performance. It's always like one of them gets into Q3 and another one's out.
Let's go to Q2 now, and the 5 drivers out were Stroll, Gasly, Ocon, Albon and Alonso. And the question is, of course, surrounding Fernando Alonso, Tom Bellingham. A question from James_Hewish. Why did the Astons not put on fresh tyres? They had no pace whatsoever, ever. Another ever. Just to clarify, they had no pace ever. I imagine it's down to tyre allocation. I'm sure that they're trying to make sure that they have at least something to use in tomorrow's race. They're very aware as well that they're struggling for pace. So why would you waste any more than you need to? So it was something that they've tried, and clearly they want to at least save something for tomorrow.
Based on how the sprint went, it could well be a bit of a DRS train throughout the field. So why not save tyres for the race to do something and have an advantage in the race? Because at the end of the day, it's a very long race, and while qualifying matters a lot in Formula One, you can get through the field. It's not a circuit that's impossible to overtake at, even though it will be difficult. And they can do something in a very long race you want to maximise your race, because that's where the points are given out.
Certainly is. Other things to mention, Gasly and Ocon, obviously very close. Gasly beating out Ocon, which was a surprise, I think, with Ocon looking quite strong this weekend. But Gasly fighting back in that teammate rivalry. Albon, that was about as much as he could get out of the car. Actually went slower in Q2 than he did in Q1, so maybe left a little bit on the table there. And I think he had that mistake, didn't he, as well, where he had to reverse in the last sector. And then, of course, we've mentioned Stroll out-qualifying Alonso, but I thought I'd mention that one more time because that's the only pain Tommy ever gets when talking about Formula One. Q3! And usually we're like, wow, what a banger. But what an anticlimax. The order was Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, Norris, Piastri, Russell, Hamilton, Hülkenberg, Tsunoda. And the question, Flesser, what was that final run? Few tenths below the first run for almost everyone. Yeah, as we mentioned at the top of the show, not the way you want to end qualifying, leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth. What I will say, and something I noticed, was of course Lando Norris's decision to go on the mediums at the beginning of Q3 and then going on to the softs. He got within, 3.5 tenths of a second on his final run, where everybody else lost 2, 3. I mean, Charles Leclerc and Sainz, I think, both went over half a second slower than their first Q3 run. You do wonder if, once again, it's not worked out for McLaren, where they've tried something different, fair enough. But with the benefit of hindsight, I think Norris could even threaten could have even threatened the front row. So you look at that and you go, Lando, not a bad performance, but he's only a couple of tenths away from challenging Charles.
Yeah, true. It'd be interesting in the race to see what they can do, because Lando has been very impressive in race trim, and it's a gamble that they tried. I've never seen it that close between the mediums and the softs. It's very, very bizarre situation. That
Not for a while.
It seems like a very long time since we've had that, where the fact that people are trying it and thinking it's worth the risk just shows how unknown it is. That you could argue also, as part of a sprint weekend, that you don't get as much practice time. The teams don't have as much data. So in that sense, I'm here for it, because it's better when they don't know everything. But unfortunately, I think it has cost McLaren and Lando in that sense, because the track conditions were best in that first run.
Yes, the drop-off was rare. And I think as well that whole medium decision, of course, the Mercedes tried it as well at the end. I think the last time we've seen that was when we had such soft compounds with the Pirelli tyre range that the softs would essentially run out, similar to what we're seeing here, right?
Yeah,
the
you couldn't do a full lap.
Struggling to do a full lap, so that's when we saw quite a few years ago now, I would say, where it was those aggressively soft compounds where they would go for a medium tyre because it would just last the whole lap. Next question. Oh, I've actually done it. The Fiaz asks, can someone explain the medium tyre logic? And that's pretty much what we've done. So the soft tyres couldn't last for some of the drivers, or they couldn't get them in the right operating window. I think Alex Albon even said, my tyres are lasting 6 corners and then they are overheating.
Jeez.
So I'm surprised
crazy.
he didn't maybe try a medium tyre, but that's the reason why some of the drivers tried that instead. And then maybe, if we see more aggressive choices from Pirelli later on and we have 52-degree track temperatures like we've had this weekend, then it might happen again.
Did Hamilton's best time was on the medium?
Yes.
Yeah. So him and Russell were extremely close, where Russell was on the softs and Hamilton on the mediums.
So Russell did that time on the softs, but he also did a medium time pretty much identically.
Quicker. Yeah, it wasn't quick.
But like a few thousandths slower than his time. So I think he would have, had they both had no lap times, Russell still would have pipped him, but it was
It's crazy,
very,
though,
very
to
close.
see that where, like, you see two teammates that close and they're on completely different compound tyres. It's very, very rare to see in Formula One. Yeah, it could be interesting to see. I just know now I've said this, they're all going to start on the same tyre, but please no. Please, Formula One, be interesting.
I would like to think not. I'm hopeful that
so.
they will change something up. Verstappen on the mediums, maybe Leclerc and Sainz both go on the softs, get involved, get stuck in, little dive bomb into turn one. I'm dreaming, but you might well see that. I think there is definitely a chance. So fingers crossed. And Tommy, that pretty much concludes our qualifying roundup. What are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are I can't believe we got 24 minutes out of that session because it wasn't wasn't a great one. But no, I do really hope that I think what this race needs tomorrow is a nice bit of strategy and intrigue. So fingers crossed for that one.
Yep, and my biggest flop is basically relying on something because Max has done and won everything up until this point. So let's see.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting it for a slight mistake in SQ3 that still.
He did lock up in FP1. I'm just saying. But let's see what the race has in store tomorrow. We'll be live on Twitch, Matt P1 Tommy. Come and join us if you want to be with two goofy Formula One fans, and we'll be screaming all the way through, I'm sure. And that's it. See you soon. See you tomorrow. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye.